Hey, folks, it's time for the quote of the day, and I cannot stress enough how important this one is. Without a doubt, and I say this a lot, but this one, I like genuinely, I can prove it to you. One of the most influential writers of all time. So influential, in fact, that his writings literally define some people's reality, and that is not an overstatement. I'm not overstepping by saying that. That is an actual factual thing that I'm saying there. Today, we are quoting the Italian poet, the shaper of many people's understanding of the afterlife, Dante Alighieri. Today is what we have come to celebrate as his birthday. We don't actually know. We know that he said he was a Gemini, and so this falls in that. And most people say that this is his birthday. So this is one of those ones where we're playing it loosey goosey. But as long as I'm following the birthday thing and doing a birthday every day, I cannot miss the opportunity to quote Dante. I mean, and there's people out there that'll say, well, I don't know who Dante Alighieri is. You do. You absolutely do. You may not recognize the fact that you do, but you absolutely know who Dante is. As a matter of fact, Dante is so well known that when people talk about the Inferno book that he wrote, they say Dante's Inferno as if that's the title of the book. It's not. Inferno is the title of the book, but most people just say Dante's Inferno as if it's just one thing in the title. It's not. And the Inferno is actually just part of another like collection, a 3-part collection that he wrote, which is the Divine Comedy. That's where you get paradise and things like that. And the Inferno is the one that changed reality for a lot of people. Now, this is going to be difficult for those of you of faith, those of you that read the Bible, those of you that have that understanding of the world. This is going to be difficult for you to come to terms with, but your belief in heaven and hell, what you imagine in your head when people talk about hell, isn't from the Bible. It doesn't come from the Bible. And a lot of people don't really recognize that. A lot of people have a hard time with that because they believe that because the Bible mentions hell, that it has to be talking about this version of it, because you don't understand the timeline of how these things worked and how essentially this very, very popular poem written by an Italian poet 700 years ago became what we now consider to be the reality of how heaven and hell exist. That's the truth. Those words, those terms are mentioned in the Bible, but they are not described to any effect. Like you cannot pull most people's understanding of what hell is from the Bible because it's just not there. But it is written by Dante. And it caught fire. No pun intended on that one, considering I'm talking about hell, but it caught fire. It was, now this is important to understand. This is one of those times where somebody wrote something, people appreciated it a little bit, but it really didn't hit its stride until well after his death, like 500 years after his death. But it has definitely hit its stride today. Their entire concept of heaven and hell as we know them, as they are taught in churches and things like that, it comes down to the representation that Dante put forth in his writings. Now, I know that that's difficult for people that very devoutly believe in the writings of the Bible, but the Bible doesn't talk about, the 7 levels of hell and how certain people go here and certain people go there. And, it's this hot burning for hotter and this and hot and blazing. Like that's not in the Bible. It's just not. And as much as people want it to be, and as much as people will pull passages out that mention heat and, this thing coming from flame, that doesn't mean it came from hell. And then oftentimes there will be a mention of hell, but there's no mention of this version of it, right? Dante created this. This is essentially at this point in time, it could be considered propaganda for people that had that belief, and that people really fucking believe it. Like they hold on to it. It's important to them. The representations of the afterlife that Dante put forward as just a literary creation are what people hold on to as their fucking reality. But it's just a poem. That's all it is. It's just a poem. And it's a beautiful poem. And I'm going to get to that poem. I'm going to read to you from that poem because I think what it says is important. But it's really, really important that you start with the baseline understanding that your version, if you believe in those things, the version of hell that you believe in was not in the Bible. It is in Inferno, which I cannot stop saying it that way. Now, as far as the quote of the day, I'm going to do it in 2 parts. The first part is going to be the misattributed, often paraphrased quote. Now, this came to prominence because JFK said it in one of the speeches that he gave talking about civil rights. And it's a very, very poignant and very important. The problem is that it's not the actual quote. So while I certainly do want to give you the paraphrase version because it's the part that people cling to, just keep in mind, and I will read from the poem afterwards. That's not the same thing. Like that's important to understand. Now, the paraphrased quote is, and misattributed quote is, the darkest places in hell are reserved for those who maintain their neutrality in times of moral crisis. Now, you don't really need me to tell you that it's a paraphrased quote because this was written in like 12 something by an Italian poet. He doesn't talk like that. Like it should be pretty self-explanatory when you think about when the man lived. That's not, he doesn't talk like that. But for those that don't understand that, let me read it one more time and then tell you this is by JFK who said this, and that's why it sounds like this. The darkest places in hell are reserved for those who maintain their neutrality in times of moral crisis. Now, before we talk about it, let me go and pull up, pardon the pause here. Let me go pull up the actual poem. I want to read to you what he actually wrote. Now, okay, let me clarify. This isn't what he actually wrote because it's translated. So essentially, he wrote it in Italian. Somebody has to translate that into an English version. This particular version that I'm reading is translated by Longfellow, so it's pretty accurate. But so I'm essentially giving you the real paraphrasing of the quote that I can't do because it's in Italian and I don't speak Italian. And it wouldn't do me any good to read it because it would sound horrible and you wouldn't understand it. So now let me get back to the actual poem. Let me see where we are here. Now this is in what's called canto 3. That means basically like the third verse essentially of the poem. And he says, "And I, who had my head with horror bound, said, Master, what is this which now I hear? What folk is this which seems by pain so vanquished?" Now, it's important to understand that at this point in the poem, he's essentially, before he even enters hell, he's talking to Virgil, his guide, and he's going back and forth. He says, what is this that I'm hearing? What are these screams that I'm hearing of the vanquished? And he to me, this miserable mode, maintain the melancholy souls of those who lived withouten infamy or praise. Commingled are they with that caitiff choir of angels who have not rebellious been, nor faithful were to God, but were for self. I'm going to read that last part again because I feel like it's pretty important. Commingled are they with that caitiff choir of angels who have not rebellious been, nor faithful were to God, but were for self. This is the difference between these two things. The paraphrased version talks about standing up when for moral certitude, right? Like you want to be moral, you want to be righteous. But the point that Dante makes is not that. It's that the people that don't pick a side and only care about themselves, selfishness is the problem. Now, I want you to think about that in terms of the messaging that you hear all over social media today, because I do genuinely believe that it's important. If you believe in the concepts of hell and heaven that Dante put forth, or that the Bible itself puts forth, there can be nothing clearer than in the words of Jesus and the words of Dante that selfishness, above all else, will leave you standing outside the gates of hell. That's what they're doing right there, standing outside the gates of hell. And those angels and those individuals that are with them, that chose themselves over doing good for others or even doing ill for others, they did not pick a side. They're tormented in hell by being chased by wasps that literally drain their blood every single day. Choose a side. Be on the right side, be on the wrong side. But neutrality is not an option. Happy birthday to Dante Alighieri. And to the rest of you, take care of yourself. Take care of others. I'll talk to you soon.